If anyone asked me to pinpoint a moment which made me interested in subjects that people consider creepy, I would really struggle to. Early childhood aside, it felt like I was always somewhat interested in things and topics of a darker hue. Although, even in my childhood, I was growing up in a household where blasting satanic black metal couldn't be more casual of a thing. I was already listening to metal music from my mother's womb, which conditioned me to see these weird and creepy things as the norm, and feel alienated by the pop. Yet I never really got deep into straight-up horror. When it comes to my favorite pieces of media, most of them are somehow related to horror, but rarely in the traditional sense. The films I watch are rarely your typical slasher flicks or jump scare fests. I just don't seem to vibe with those all that much. Yet, the media I do indulge in can often be categorized as horror, or at the very least something adjacent to it. I would struggle to call the Stalker game series horror, but they very much have that unsettling atmosphere that I love, and all those unscripted scares that keep me tense the whole time. Something like The Cat Lady and similar games lean a lot more into the psychological part of things, leaving a lot of downtime between actual gory horror moments. Even further down that path are games such as Pathologic, which can hardly be categorized as anything but horror, yet it doesn't have any big bad monsters or serial killers in it. It barely has any action scenes at all, yet it's masterful at creating a sense of dread simply through its themes and unforgiving mechanics. One of my favorite films of all time, Tetsuo the Iron Man, is also a perfect fit for the horror tag, yet I can hardly call it scary. It has unsettling imagery and themes, and sure, there is some revolting body horror, but the film barely has any actual scares. It was more of a hyper-stylized industrial music video that's an entire hour long. Even Garage Bad Dream Adventure, which I covered extensively in this channel, seems creepy as all heck, yet even the developer of the game insists that it isn't really meant to be a horror game, or at the very least not the horror as we know it. I am pointing out all these examples because something cropped up that quite perfectly defines what I like so much about horror, but not the usual kind of it. Enter Junkhead. Junkhead has been around for quite a while now, but there are multiple reasons why I'm only talking about it now. The short film Junkhead 1 was released back in 2013, and I have been a dedicated fan ever since. While the short film stood well on its own, it was essentially a half-an-hour chunk from the full film, which was finished several years later. Junkhead is a brainchild of one Takahide Hori, who made the entire thing nearly single-handedly. Takahide Hori, also known as Yamiken, knew nothing about filmmaking prior to creating Junkhead 1. Thinking it would be difficult wrapping his mind around digital production, Takahide undertook the gargantuan task of producing Junkhead as a stop-motion film, creating everything from individual character and set models to the soundtrack himself, learning new skills he needed along the way. Seeing and hearing the results of that is really inspirational to me. He was joined by some more people for the full release of Junkhead, but even then, due to a tiny budget and the handmade quality, the rest of the film took 4 more years to make, which totals up to Junkhead being in production for a long 7 years. Even then, you might find different sources saying that the full version of Junkhead was released either in 2017 or 2021. The film was in fact finished in 2017, but as far as my knowledge goes, Junkhead was stuck in a bit of a limbo of only being shown in select few film festivals and such, only to be released for a wider audience several years later after being finished. It's already 2023, 6 years after the film's completion, and I only now got up to properly talk about this film, mostly because of that. I blame whoever handled the publishing and distribution of Junkhead, because even after the public release in 2021, I kept waiting for Junkhead to become more accessible for a wider audience, so I could yell at people online to watch the film and support the people behind it, yet it never happened. I guess it is possible to watch it on some streaming services, but certainly not in my region. I would gladly buy a physical release of the film, as well as an art book and some other film's merchandise, but it doesn't seem to be shipped to anywhere outside Japan. So, it is time to raise my good old flag of skull and bones for this one. For once, I'm ashamed of it, because I genuinely want to support the author of something I love so much, yet I simply cannot. Anyway, Junkhead itself is quite the enigma in the horror film scene. I believe it is mostly so because it's a brainchild of a single person. There weren't any higher-ups telling Takahide that some decisions just don't make sense for mass appeal and would not result in a money-raking consumer-centric product. The main point of attraction in Junkhead is the visual presentation. Just a glance at any frame of it makes one understand that it's a horror flick. Junkhead's color palette is dominated by desaturated browns. Its brutalist architecture is wholly reminiscent of the enormous industrial abysses of Blame, with all of the cold, rectangular concrete corridors, the always rusty metal pipes intertwined throughout the entire world, as if veins in a living organism. Salad fingers would thrive here.
The feeling of rust against my salad fingers is almost orgasmic.
And all of the characters are on the spectrum between weird, hairless, fleshy creatures to mostly mechanical cyborgs. Some of the more biological creatures even remind me of the recent Scorn, which is a visual marvel itself. They can be disgusting and even absolutely repulsive, but in a good way, since that's the intended effect. All that indicates that Junkhead is clearly not for kids, yet the film has plenty of comedy relief and goof moments that make it feel like a cartoon. A weird and twisted one, but still a cartoon, and that fact can easily put off the more typical horror fan, making it seem like Junkhead is not quite for adults either. The closest anomaly in cinema history I can think of is 9, which is an animated film mostly aimed at a younger audience, but it was a post-apocalyptic horror adventure with some properly scary moments, which is far from a child-friendly theme and execution. Combining horror and lightheartedness seems like a very odd move, and could make one think that by doing that, it is missing any specific audience. But it's precisely that, which makes Junkhead feel so unique and uncompromised for me. Despite its horror theme, it's not all that scary, and that's what I like about it. For the longest time I disliked horror films, but I got to eventually realize that the things I like about horror are not the scares, but the dark atmosphere, the heavier topics and the surprisingly liberating possibilities for presentation. And that's precisely where Junkhead really shines. Or rather, collects rust and dust. Horror as a genre feels like it should be serious, since it can deal with all kinds of heavy topics. From just simple, good old serial murder sprees to deep and personal emotional trauma. But at the same time it allows for so many things that would feel absolutely ridiculous in any other genre. Having an invincible nightmare monster would make no sense in a serious psychological drama, for example, but horror films can pull off delving into the same heavy topics in no less of a serious manner, but while also utilizing all sorts of impossible villains and environments as plot tools. They get to create visuals and sounds that would seem impossible anywhere else. And Junkhead just so happens to use stop-motion animation as its medium. And the more I think about it, the more of a perfect fit it seems for creating an unsettling atmosphere. I believe anyone who had ever seen Tool's stop-motion music videos could confirm that. Out of all these stop-motion techniques, claymation feels like one of the most uncanny ones too, and Junkhead has plenty of that. I had mentioned Garage Bad Dream Adventure in the beginning of the video for a reason. It must be one of the creepiest and most surreal fictional worlds I had ever witnessed. Yet, it is not really a horror game. Its aim is not a scare, but rather to tell a dark tale. It's a point-and-click adventure about solving puzzles and fishing for crabs. Yet the character and the environment designs in the game are utterly unsettling, especially in the 1999 version with all of its technical limitations. The game was recently remade using contemporary tools, lifting a lot of the limitations the old version had, but it made me understand that it can be precisely those limitations that can make visuals feel uncanny, and perfectly fitting for the horror tag. Garage used all these photorealistic textures and detailed environments, yet the pre-rendered characters and sprites made the lighting work in unnatural ways, and the low resolution the game is displayed in obfuscates a lot of the details, which in turn makes the brain fill in the blanks itself and make the familiar looking visuals alien. All those flaws make the familiar looking visuals seem out of this world, thus even creepier. Now, I don't want to say that stop motion animation is a flaw, far from it, but I believe that it's a perfect match for horror precisely because of the uncanny valley effect it creates. For those unfamiliar with the term, uncanny valley is essentially this bit between something looking realistic and unrealistic, where something makes enough sense for the human mind to think it's realistic, but there's something unnatural about it that makes people creeped out. Stop motion animation utilizes photos of real-life objects for its visuals, making all the images instantly look photorealistic, not much less than something filmed with real human actors, yet it's all an animation stitched together from many different shots staged by hand. That will pretty much never look as smooth as digital animation when it comes to movement. So even when it's not used for horror, stop motion animation tends to have this quality of making the brain think that the perceived image is photorealistic, yet the unnatural movement damages that image of realism just enough to make it feel that something's off, but not quite enough to make it look completely unnatural. Now of course, Jughead is set in a dying world, full of mutants and cold industrial environments, but it might not feel as creepy as a live-action film as opposed to stop-motion. Even the aforementioned Tetsuo, the Iron Man, despite being a live-action film, utilized stop-motion techniques to make some scenes feel extra surreal and impactful. Jughead doesn't mean to outright scare the viewer either. Its whimsical characters and the goofier moments allow the film to be partially categorized as comedy and seem nearly family-friendly. Despite the characters looking creepy and surreal, they can be endearing in a lot of cases. That is accentuated by the voice acting in the film. Since it was only a one-man project, Takahide Hori voiced all the characters himself. To not make it sound like it's dubbed by just one man, he made up a fictional language of half whispers and grunts, just to get the emotion across. In part, such voice acting also adds something to the uneasiness, having a human voice make unfamiliar sounds, but a made-up gibberish language is just silly sounding by nature. Yet the dark topic subject and the masterfully crafted, uninviting environments pull the film back into the horror territory, with the uncanny stop-motion technique only amplifying the effect, making even the goofy scenes retain the unnatural quality. Lately I've been noticing a trend of lo-fi horror, which I'm aware isn't anything new. It's been popular ever since the first Blair Witch film, but with both filmmaking and game development becoming more accessible, I've been seeing plenty of horror projects that use the budget constraints and often even artificial technical limitations with the intention to make something look retro-stylized, to utilize the fear of the unknown by showing less and obfuscating details. Jughead has an interesting relationship with that mindset. The way Jughead is produced is hyper-detailed, so it makes little sense to hide its stunning handcrafted visuals. Honestly, it is awe-inspiring seeing how much work is put into every scene, from building the backdrops to editing special effects. All the creepiness of Jughead is shown in full glory, but it has other things it restrains from showing easily. This is where I'd like to bring up another horror stop-motion film released to the public around similar time. Phil Tippett's Mad God. Mad God is another madman's passion project, which apparently took 30 years to make, and it turned out to be likely the most grotesque stop-motion horror on this planet so far. Mad God keeps shocking the viewer with its nasty creatures and brutal scenes throughout the entire film's runtime. It is one of the best examples why stop-motion works for horror so well. It also seems to have garnered more public attention and acclaim than Jughead, but this video is about Jughead instead, because there's something that it does a lot better than Mad God. That's right, Mad God fanboys. This is where the slander begins. Mad God is a visual feast, or something closer to a devilish Sabbath, and it's most definitely a worthwhile film. I don't regret seeing it whatsoever, but it's not something I'd want to rewatch. The place where it failed for me is the storytelling. It's only natural to want to show a lot when having these super detailed handcrafted stop-motion visuals, but what Mad God chooses to show is mostly numerous pieces of world building. It's a scene after a scene after a scene of different locations and different characters doing different terrible things, and not even that far in, it becomes exhausting not being able to detect any concrete continuous plot. Whenever I'd feel like I caught on to something, the film would switch up again. I wasn't able to get invested into any character or plot thread. I'll be honest with you, my limited mind wasn't capable of understanding if there really was any story without any summaries online. Mad God does not just spoon-feed the viewer with world building, it pours gallons of it from a barrel straight down the throat through a funnel. Junkhead is the opposite. It retains the detailed visuals, the grimy environments, in a way closer to Mad God than lo-fi horror projects, but it purposefully hides a lot of its world through storytelling. Junkhead is a completely character-driven story. It does outright tell some things about its universe, but it's simplified down to a few easy-to-follow sentences, just to set up the premise of the plot, so the character's journey could have more meaning. And while those sentences are few and brief, there could be tons of things behind them that could have led the world of Junkhead to the point it is in the film, and it's purposefully not elaborated on to maintain a sense of mystique. There is little told about the world, but the snippets we get to see are stunning, so it creates a desire to know more about the junk world. It creates a feeling that Junkhead is just a small slice of a universe that is a lot bigger than the main character story, and that just makes me keep thinking about the world after the credits roll. And hey, what do you know? After the full release of Junkhead, it was announced that it's just the first film of a trilogy, and the second one is in fact called Junk World. I'm excited! But yeah, that's mostly the reason why I prefer Junkhead and why I chose it as the main film for this video. Coming back to stop motion itself, Mad God is way more disturbing out of the two, and illustrates my point that the stop motion technique is perfect for horror as best as anything can. The takeaway: world needs more uncanny stop motion animation and weird passion projects. Also, it would be hella sexy if you watched Junkhead if you haven't done so already. If you made it this far into the video, I'm incredibly grateful and I hope you enjoyed it. It is very pleasant being able to talk about something I'm passionate about on this channel, aside from the regular video games. You can support me and help to keep this channel going by donating to my Ko-fi page, as I'm currently sitting on my butt trying to find a paying job. Thanks again for watching, and see you in another video.